Welcome to the State of Mind virtual speaker series. This series has been developed to provide education and support to youth, caregivers, and educators during this challenging time. This series is a collaboration between two local nonprofits, One in Five and MindPeace, and various community mental health partners. We're glad you're here to educate yourself and to learn how to keep your brain in a healthy state of mind.
Welcome. I want to thank you for joining me on this beautiful summer evening. It may be that you can hear some of the birds. I hear my neighbors and their children not too far. I think maybe they're having a barbecue, and I can even hear the air conditioners, and I guess that goes with a nice summer evening. I want to thank you for joining me for State of Mind, this video series put forth by One in Five and MindPeace, specifically looking tonight at how we as individuals, how do we care for ourselves, what we call care for the caregiver. If you're an adult, if you're a mental health professional, if you work in a caring part of healthcare, or if you have a major role in caring for someone else, there is a particular set of challenges that go with that, and it's well worth thinking about. The first time I really came across this, oh, by the way, I'm Dan Nelson. I am a child psychiatrist here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I work with Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, where I've been delighted to work for the last 21 years. I work with the National Center for School Crisis and Bereavement, and I also work with the Center for Health and Innovative Learning. And so what came to mind is I did a lot of work with families during the early response and intervention to the Oklahoma City bombing. And we became very quickly aware that the people who were there and providing help and support were very much affected by a significant exposure to challenging situations that can lead to a normal response that can be unsettling, because loss of appetite or changes in one's mood, irritability, difficulty sleeping, even nightmares. Those things are all pretty much a normal response to an abnormal situation. So some people can become additionally distressed by being worried that the normal response seems so unnormal that maybe something is wrong or something bad is happening. And our mind and our body, which work together in concert, is made to have a capacity to deal with threat and loss. And so there are significant changes that can occur. Now, left unchecked, these same changes that are adaptive in the early part of our dealing with stress, if they're severe and persistent, they lead to significant problems. And you maybe have heard about fight or flight, those, adrenaline response. A very famous physiologist named William Cannon came up with this. And through time, we also know there's other responses. It's not just fight or flight. Some people, when they're distressed, they withdraw. They might play possum. They might turn inward. And so it's important to just accept what's happening and think about what it is and how it's affecting you. So this high level of adrenaline can also lead to high levels of a stress hormone called cortisol. And both of those are kind of mediated by a part of the brain called the pituitary. And so there's this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that is so often associated with both adapting to trauma and loss and crisis, but also becoming overwhelmed by it if it's too persistent. So how do we take care of ourselves during a time where we now have a persistent threat, and it seems to go up and down, and it seems uncertain as to when we might see a vaccine and how this will evolve? So there's a lot of unknowns. So the first thing that comes to my mind when I give these talks is that I used to be a water safety instruction, a lifeguard. And one of the things they teach you right away when you go to save someone is if you swim out to somebody who's in a panic, there's a good chance they'll drown you if you don't wait until they're kind of exhausted, because you won't be powerful enough to deal with their panic and they'll pull you under. So in a sense, this is also part of the knowledge and understanding in the emergency room. there's a phrase, the first pulse you take is your own. So it's very important as a caregiver that we know how to keep ourselves in a state of, as much as possible, of harmony and balance. So how you eat, how you connect with other people, how you exercise, how you give yourself a space to meditate or pray or connect, not just with other people, but connect with kind of the larger world, or your spiritual grounding can do an awful lot to help ground us and help us kind of rejuvenate. Kind of like when we go to sleep. You can be really tired. You go to sleep. Hopefully we awaken refreshed and able to meet a new day. Now, unfortunately, a normal response can be challenges with sleep and even challenging dreams, nightmares. So that's one of the reasons why, if you can keep a set routine, predictable eating times, predictable times to exercise, and even a circumscribed, a defined time that you might sit down and journal, hopefully away from bedtime. Maybe right before dinner is a good time, and I'll tell you why. But if you sit down and describe what your concerns are, and even if you don't know what to do about that concern, just kind of say, how soon do I need to revisit this to help with this problem? Because often if you put the concerns or worries into three barrels. One is, this is important, it needs to be dealt with now, maybe even before I go to bed, depending on how important it is. The second, or the next morning. The second barrel is, probably should get to this, maybe in the next few days, maybe a week or so, but this is something I should accomplish fairly soon. And the third barrel, which there's a fair number of worries that go into barrel 3, or ABC, the C barrel, those might be things that you're worried about, but you may never have to deal with. They may go away by themselves. They're not acute. They're not, as my mom would say, they're not eating any bread. They're not costing you or the family anything. And just, it's so strange, but by segregating these out so that you have a sense of which ones have urgency and importance in the immediate future, and which ones can be kind of watched, put on the back burner, what it does is it begins to take things off of your plate. It begins to take things that seem immense and so many things, and it says, well, you know what, today, I'm just going to do these things. If you've gone through planning an event or a wedding, where you have this long list of tasks, there's just no way to do all those tasks in one day or even 1 week. And so this is a way we begin to organize things and make it into more bite-sized pieces. But also by setting that one time during the day where you process these things, kind of commit to whatever it is. It might be 10 minutes, it might be half an hour, but to organizing this, what it does is it allows you to say, got it, know what to do, now I can put it aside and begin to relax, begin to calm down. I begin to think about what would I love to do, because crisis, anxiety, worries, and woes have a tendency to kind of get on our back and follow us around, and that's where, believe it or not, these stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, it gets us going. And those changes, those physiologic changes, you probably have heard about this, there's a lot of different stressful related illnesses. So headaches, ulcers, insomnia, challenges with one's diet or weight management, all those things can easily begin to get kind of disruptive and hard to deal with. So this is a kind of a straightforward, practical way to begin to organize one's life in a way that feels manageable. It's also true that it's very important, I've talked about affiliation and supports. We have supports that might come from our families and our dear friends, who are the trusted people we can share kind of the gnarly stuff with. But also, a lot of works have a employee assistance program. Often there's no cost to that. These are trained professionals. They can also help a person determine whether they need a higher level of professional intervention. But we also have other community supports. So if we think about our spiritual home, if we think about activities that we might enjoy doing with other people, some people run with other people, they might play games with other people. It may be that you love to take your family for a walk in the park. Setting aside times to do that, even if it's just that one day, but predictably once a week, where you do something that is particularly joyful. If you will, a mini vacation, a staycation, if you will, where you don't have to, it's so hard to travel right now, but there are places we can go that are safe during COVID, and that, one of the reasons I like doing the talk outside, despite the chirpy birds, is that for me, nature, just being outside changes how I feel about the world. It's how I draw energy. So if I spend time walking in the park or going for a bicycle ride, that's really good for me. It's especially nice if I get to share it with somebody I care about. But also things like prayer and meditation, mindfulness in a space that you find particularly beautiful or enjoyable or aesthetic can be an interesting and important way to recharge your emotional reserves. It's also true that as you recharge those emotional reserves and as you make your life more predictable, even though there's chaos going around out here, but if you get that routine, it really helps us to become much more efficient at digesting food, about having an active and effective nervous system and immune system, and it begins to give us a sense of security whereby we can also then begin to give back to others. And for many of us who really enjoy being a caregiver, that can also be a source of regenerative healing for us. But here's the caveat. In a time of severe crisis, people who are generally oriented and enjoy caring for others and see the urgency and the need for help, we can be swept into a situation where suddenly we're not taking care of ourselves. We're not getting adequate exercise or rest. We might choose ways of adapting that are not as healthy. Increasing alcohol or drug consumption can be a real slippery slope. I know I tend to want to eat. I like to eat food to feel soothed. The problem with that is I gain weight, and gaining weight is not healthy for me. So I have to begin to think, well, what's an alternative way for me to calm my nervous system and feel connected and take better care of myself simply by recognizing that I'm choosing something that I know is not really that good for me in the long run. There are some things that seem innocuous in small and limited dosing. A little bit of wine or beer, or even a little bit of spirits, what is called 1 or 2 alcohol equivalents, but less than 5 per week for women and less than 7 for men during the week is where the healthy margin is. I like to remind people, if they've thought at all about quitting smoking, during the time of COVID is the time to do it. COVID attacks a lot of the body's systems, but it's unquestionably the biggest risk to any of us is our pulmonary system, our lungs. And alcohol and tobacco greatly reduce pulmonary function. And added together, 1 + 1 equals probably about 7. 7 times more risk if you're drinking and smoking. Your immune system's going to be less able to respond. Your lungs, smoking paralyzed. There's little tiny hairs that move the mucus through our body, which is part of how we protect our immune system. Mucus is very protective. It's also reduced with alcohol and with smoking. So this is a really good time to be sure that you're using a balanced approach to what you put in your body. Obviously having a well-balanced diet, and this is kind of interesting, and having the opportunity to talk and interact with people that you care about while you're eating. When we eat, we naturally calm our nervous system down. It's what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system, that's the adrenaline. That's the stuff that gears us up to run, to fight, to hide, to protect ourselves. But in general, our species, for a very long time, when we sit down to eat, we tend to do that in a safe place. And if we do it with people we know and care about, that affiliation begins to say, hey, I'm safe, I'm secure, there's people who care about me. So if you're living alone, if you're elderly especially, see if you can get a FaceTime or a phone, put it on speaker, and talk and interact with people while you're eating, if those people are the kind of people who help you calm down and help you problem solve and feel safe and secure. In terms of moving ahead, I like to tell all the people I work with, it's good to be mindful, conscious, aware. Situational awareness is very powerful of how this could go. What I call prepare for the worst, but at the same time also nurture your hopefulness. We can hope for the best and prepare for the worst and balance ourselves in a very important way. If all we do is put on rose-colored glasses and pretend everything's going to be fine no matter what, we're not adaptive. What I like to tell people that I work with, if they've had the experience of driving, if you have a flat tire in your car and you ignore that flat tire, a flat tire, you're going around a corner, could cause you to lose control of your car. You could hit a telephone pole, you could hit another car, you could hit a person. You or somebody could be injured from something that if I'm careful with, and that when I was growing up, we didn't have much money, and when I remember more than once I've got a number of flat tires, and my strategy was to go to the gas station every day. Back then you could get air for free and it was right there. And I would pull in and air up my tire and know that until I had time to put in a plug or get a new tire or get a used tire, that was part of my day-to-day ritual, because it was one of those problems that if I didn't take care of it on a definitive level, I needed to take care of it on a maintenance kind of level. And there's a lot of psychological challenges that are like that. So if we could go back to our little journal, our list, A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, those buckets, that's one way to see, okay, the A bucket, if I've got a flat tire, if my tire has a leak, and I'm gonna choose to wait to fix it, that's gonna go in the A bucket. It's gonna take me a little bit of time, maybe every morning, and even then, I know that tire is not as safe as it should be, so I'm not gonna maybe drive on the highway in the same way. I'm maybe gonna take corners in a different way. So all that thinking about what are my risks and vulnerability in this particular situation, situational awareness, can help me to make healthier decisions. Later, I might get the resources, be able to get a used or new tire. And now I don't have to leave it in the A bucket, because now, if I bought a used tire, it might go in the 3C bucket. If I get a new tire, hopefully I get 2. I think it's better to replace 2 at a time from what I understand. 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Hopefully I can get those resources going, and I know, at least those 2 tires, kind of done with them for whatever, 60, 80,000 miles. That can be a long time. But I also might be wanting to think about, well, looking at the tire, let's look at the brakes, let's look at those other tires. So I begin to see, are there other things on the horizon? Now, dealing with COVID can be very similar to this. One of the things I would tell you is that we have got fairly good scientific evidence that taking vitamin D3, 5,000 units a day, helps to boost the immune system. It makes you more resilient. And taking 50 milligrams of zinc is also helpful. It's also true that when you get into a challenge with COVID, if you should catch COVID, it's very difficult to determine how much the COVID is affecting your pulmonary system, your lungs. So I read this early on. The physicians in New York and New Orleans, the places that were getting it badly, people would come in and they would think they were just now having breathing problems, when in fact their breathing had been compromised for some time. And one doctor from New Orleans even said, you know, I don't even use my stethoscope because everyone's lungs really don't sound too bad. They sound okay, they sound healthy. But if I put a pulse oximeter, and this is a little thing you can buy from the drugstore, it's not inexpensive, but it's not horrible. It's about $50 to $60. And you put it on your finger and it counts the heartbeats that you have, but it also measures how much oxygen is in your blood. And normal distribution of that is usually between 93% and 99%, sometimes even 100%. And if you buy one of those early, you can kind of see, what's my range? What do I usually average. And for some people, if they do have a smoking problem or pulmonary disease like COPD, you may not be up in the 90s, where that's where it's most healthy. So a normal, healthy individual, even when they have COVID, they should stay in that 90% oxygen saturation range, 90 and above. If I'm usually there and now I have COVID and I've dropped into the 80s, now I need to start taking that test probably every 30 minutes. And if I stay down for more than 2 to 3 hours, I need to have a phone call to my physician or to the emergency room. I might even need to go to the emergency room depending on the status of what's going on. So that's the time, if your pulse oximeter shows that your oxygen saturation is well below, below 90%, doesn't have to be well below. Because if you wait until it's at, low 70s or 60s, that's where it's very difficult to do interventions to protect the lungs that they do in hospitals. They can give various medications, and thank goodness those interventions are becoming more and more effective. Since March, we have learned so much about how to treat this so that more people survive. One of those things that they've learned is if you lay down on the floor face down with a pillow, you actually open the lower parts of the lung and you get better circulation and better breathing that opens up the lungs and makes them resilient. So that would be a way to kind of keep yourself in the 90s for a longer time. So I like to tell people, look, we're all in this together. We can get through this if we work together. I will absolutely remind people that science is our friend. Science took us to the moon. Science is why my car works so well. I don't have a carburetor anymore. I got fuel injection. My car doesn't break down near like it did when I was younger. And it's because we're capable of improving things and making systems more reliable, more safe. When I was a child, there were no airbags. There weren't even seat belts. Science taught us seat belts are wonderful. I've seen people being worried about the recommendations for masks, and some people even seem to feel it's a violation of their rights. What I would say to that person is consider, first of all, the mask protects other people. Secondly, the worst time for contagion, the worst time you're going to spread the COVID virus is for the 3 days before you know you're ill. So if you wait to put on the mask for when you have symptoms, the cat's already out of the bag. Also, in terms of how we get along, we all recognize it's dangerous, scientifically proven, to smoke in restaurants because you're going to hurt other people. It's also dangerous for yourself, but if you're smoking in an enclosed area, when I was growing up, I had a family member who was smoking in the car. And I know that was terrible. And in fact, I have some challenges with asthma, which puts me at higher risk for COVID. And it may come from that exposure to smoke. Smoke's very toxic. Also, it's true that we all drive down the right side of the road. We hopefully use things to protect ourselves from illnesses in other ways, such as sexually transmitted illnesses. If we're mindful of that, we live in a safer environment. If we don't drive when we're using any kind of alcohol, or if we're tired, we have a lot of rules about protecting each other. And thank goodness, because a lot of people die in automobile accidents. A lot of people die from smoking. Automobile accidents, 38,000 a year in the United States, up and down, 2 to 3,000. You probably heard of the opiate crisis. That's been pushing up closer to 80,000 a year. That's a lot of people. COVID is now, just in these 5 months, it's 140,000. I'm sure many of you are watching that number. We worry about that number. But smoking in the United States kills 440,000 people a year. So again, good time to quit. Even if COVID wasn't here, there's no time like the present for smoking. And I'll tell you an odd thing. I don't know why we do this in the United States. We allow people to advertise something that's that poisonous. If there's a new medicine out, a drug company creates this and it kills even a handful of people, they don't get to put it on the market. And I know a lot of people need to smoke. They probably are challenged by addiction, and they maybe should have that choice. But it really concerns me that we let people hire psychologists and create advertising to convince people, especially children, to smoke, because the interesting thing is if you're not a smoker by the time you're 18, the chances of you being a lifetime smoker are very, very low. So this particular industry targets children to become smokers, otherwise they're not in business. So I think about the big picture a lot, and for our safety, for COVID safety, for the safety of our citizens, it's probably good to start thinking about, are we living in the way that we really want to live and treating each other in the way we want to be treated? I love the golden rule. If I can treat people the way I want to be treated, I know that we live in a better world. So if things do become overwhelming, if it's hard to function, if it's hard for you to be able to do your job, or if you're blowing up and thinking or saying harmful things to the people you love, it's a good time to get help and support. And again, for some of us, that might be just to go to an employee assistance program, call a friend, meet with our spiritual leaders. A lot of spiritual institutions have counseling services and therapy services from professionals, and those people and even our own monitoring can tell us when it's time to just go ahead and go to the emergency room, or call my doctor, or find a therapist, find a couples counselor. One of the nice things that's happening now, in my opinion, is we're seeing much more telehealth, which means you can get services without leaving your home. Someone will talk to you over the phone, they'll talk to you audio-visually, and they can give you a lot of help and a lot of guidance. So it's a wonderful thing that's happening in terms of us being able to be adaptive, such that people don't have to travel and put themselves at risk. I do want to thank you very much for joining me on this summer evening. We've kind of slowly watched the sun set, and now I can hear some of the locusts. Even during times of crisis, even in terms of a pandemic, there's a lot of beauty in the world. There's a lot of people who really care and love each other and do kind things for each other. There's beauty in nature, and please consider for you how to make that part of your day-to-day existence, your day-to-day life, so that you feel like you're still connected to what is really important about living, which is our connection with each other and our connection to the bigger world and the spiritual world that we all share. My very best wishes to you and your family, and peace and blessings to you all. Thank you. Have a good evening.
A special thank you to our State of Mind speakers and to you for joining us. More videos and educational resources can be found at 1 in 5's website. If you feel like you or your child is in need of professional support, therapists are available. Please refer to MindPeace's school-based or community resource page. For a mental health crisis or emergencies, patients and families are encouraged to contact their current mental health provider first. This allows the mental health provider who knows your child best to provide support and direction. If your child does not have a mental health provider and they are experiencing a non-life-threatening mental health crisis, you are encouraged to contact the Psychiatric Intake Response Center at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. 513-636-4124. Call 911 or go to the emergency department if you are experiencing a medical emergency, a life-threatening mental health crisis, or are directed to go there by a medical provider. This will help limit the spread of COVID-19 in our community and allow our emergency departments to care for patients with the most critical needs first.